Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Left-Handed Leftist. As you all know by now, my name is Carlos, and I am the host here. So, you all, we have a really incredible episode for you all today. Today, we actually are going to be talking about a range of things. We're going to be talking about Wes Moore's Leave No One Behind Slate. We're going to get into a little bit of foreign policy. We're going to get into a little bit of healthcare, of reparations, and Maryland conversation. It's going to be a lot. And kind of the reason it's going to be a lot is because we have probably one of the most peculiar guests that we've ever had. His name is Barry O'Connell. He is a author and a political commentator. He founded the Facebook group Everybody's Maryland Politics, and also is the author and founder of the Maryland Wire on Substack. You all, one caveat I will make to this podcast, which is the same in every podcast, it's just my first time, I think, even saying it, really, is that the thoughts, opinions, and views espoused on this podcast, the ones made by me, are my own. The ones made by the guests are their own. It's going to be a very, very, very interesting podcast. And as he said it himself, he was not on here to be nice. And he knows a lot of people are going to be upset by what he says. And some of them I agree with, and some of them I do not. Awesome, y'all. So without further ado, let's get into the podcast. Awesome. What's up, you all? Barry O'Connell, the man, the myth, the legend, the author extraordinaire. How's it going? How was your holiday week?
My week was fantastic. I definitely enjoyed it. I had Thanksgiving dinner with everyone who loves me. I ate alone.
No,
it was a good time.
That's good. Yeah, me and my family, actually my mom got sick, so we were gonna go to like her father's side of the family event. It was like there's supposed to be like 70 people there, so she got sick, so we decided to just like do something small at home with just us. And let me tell you, it is so much easier doing something small than having the whole family cooking, cleaning, and all that. I'm like, yes, let's keep it small, and then when we have to do something with the family, let's just go out to eat and just let somebody else worry about cleaning.
I've simplified Thanksgiving dinner down to a one-pot meal. It consists of everything I really like from Thanksgiving dinner.
Really? Okay.
It's kind of nuts, but I buy pre-cooked turkey.
Okay.
Stovetop stuffing,
Okay.
mushrooms, celery, onions. So I make the mix for the stuffing just like my dad made it when I was a kid. My mom couldn't cook to save her life. I mean, she was a terrible cook. My dad would cook Thanksgiving dinner. Then I mix the whole thing into the stovetop stuffing and dumped in the turkey, serve it with gravy on top. It's sort of like everything I like at Thanksgiving with one pot to clean.
Okay, Barry, I might have to have you on I'm going to have you on multiple podcasts, but I might have to have you on just one where we just talk about food and cooking, because that's one of my passions. I'm like, look, when I give up all this political stuff, Barry, you're going to see me just talk about culinary stuff all the time and just forget about this.
I got an idea for a restaurant that would be great.
Okay, we're going to talk offline about this.
Absolutely.
Talk offline about this, because we're going to look, when the whole country comes to a crazy halt, you'll just see the Carlos and Barry restaurant.
I seriously want to have a restaurant called Flaming Desserts that opens at 10 o'clock at night and stays open till 6, and make it after the movies, after the show, after the bar, after you have the fight with a girl and you want to go get a cup of coffee and a piece of pie.
That's nice.
But accentuated with flaming desserts. And they're not all flaming, but just that'd be the house specialty. And it's sort of like, can you picture taking a date to a place like that at like 3 o'clock in the morning? It's like,
it's nice.
I think it would work. I think it would seriously work. Because I worked at an IHOP, and we used to get the 2 o'clock after the bar rush.
Yep.
So, the place would fill up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Everybody drunk, a little high, coming in, just saying, just give me something. And you add flames, you add some good drinks, some good spectacle to it. Look, Barry, you may have messed around and found your first investor in the restaurant here, because
I think it would work. Seriously
Okay.
do. But let's talk a little politics today.
Right. Let's get out the kitchen for a second. So you all just kind of like bringing in some of the background information. This podcast episode actually started because I was reading one of Barry O'Connell's articles in his Substack, The Maryland Wire, talking about Wes Moore's political slate he's bringing in, called the Leave No One Behind Slate. So I reached out to you and I was like, look, I need to get you on to talk about this. So before we get into the different legislators who may or may not be targeted, can you kind of give us a overview of what this slate is?
Well, we could call it the Leave No One Behind Slate. That's the official title. It could also be called the Screw with Wes and You're Dead slate, because this is basically a message to people that you are not taking me down in a messy special session. If you think you're going to trash my presidential hopes and kill my political career over nonsense, then think twice. And I hate to say it, this is going to be unpopular. I know everybody's going to hate me when I say this, but Reparations Study Commission is nonsense. We already studied it. We studied it forwards, backwards, side to side. We're done. We know the issues. It's like, and if we forget the issues, we'll look up the last 10 Reparations Study Commission reports that we've had. So it's sort of like everybody is like, he's against reparations. No, he's not. He's against studying it for 2 more years in endless meetings and arguments and fights. And, reparations is not going to be an easy thing because, well, first of all, who gets reparations? Because if we're doing a state reparation deal, we're going to say, okay, prove you're descended from a Maryland slave and we'll give you reparations. And everybody else go back to South Carolina, go back to North Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi. You're not getting it here. Can think again. That's not going to go over real well. I mean, what is that? I mean, do you know what I say what I mean when I say the Great Migration?
Explain it for myself and the viewers.
Okay, for everybody else, nobody wanted to give a black man a job in, say, 1915. Like, blacks were not at the hire this man first list anywhere. So World War I started, and suddenly the boys are marching off to France, but they need guns, they need all the things you need, the shipbuilding, everything, and suddenly anybody who could swing a hammer made good money. So all these folks out of all the southern states head north. They come into places like Baltimore where they can get good jobs. And, it's one of those things where you've got a cousin in Baltimore. Well, you're going to go on up there. You're going to get a job. You're going to sleep on the floor until you get a paycheck. And then you're going to invite a couple more relatives. And suddenly the whole clan is up from, Spartansburg, or, like, ask anybody in Maryland where their family's from. And more than half of the black folks I know will say South Carolina.
Yeah,
I mean,
South or North Carolina. Yep.
Yeah.
Even I have some family from North Carolina who, they made the trip up here. Yeah. No, you're right.
The Great Migration, and then then they stayed. There's no point in when you've been making Baltimore wages, you're not going back to the south end of a mule going north. So you stayed. Now, maybe it sucks sometimes, but you stayed. And then the Depression hit, and then it really sucked. But we went to war, and suddenly everybody's working again. And the white boys are the first ones to go off to war, and the black folks take the jobs, and the city starts to fill up. And then after the war, what really brought a lot of the blacks in Maryland north, that I never hear anybody talk about this, is VA loans. Okay. So you take a soldier, he gets back. First thing he wants to do is he wants to have a drink, play with his girl, get married, buy a house, the whole bit. You go back and live the American dream. So he's not going to have any
kids, picket fence, all that.
Yeah, for $12,500, because that was the maximum amount you could borrow on a VA loan. And suddenly all these places, like you go into Prince George's County, there's a huge number of homes that were built by servicemen returning from the war at $12,500. And here's something interesting, because when we're talking about shifting political machines, before the soldiers came home from World War II, and even up into a number of years and into the 60s, the biggest political control was the hands of the Sasser machine. Well, Sasser was part of a clan that was they married into the Diggs family, and one of the Diggs family got Fort Washington as a land grant back in the 1600s. I mean, we're talking about huge amount. Picture the whole expanse of Fort Washington given to you. Oh, and then you got to fill it with slaves and houses and manor houses, and you live the life and be the king. And so these people were still in control up until World War II. Okay, so now we've got these people who are coming up, and they're going into D.C. and Baltimore because that's where they can find housing. Because the old Sasser machine was not going to let them live in Prince George's County, and then then the color line breaks, and they make a deal, and they let people live in some of the some of the towns close to the D.C. line. Basically, if you take a look at Prince George's County, everything inside the Beltway goes back to, breaking the color barrier. Uh, do you know Cheverly, Maryland?
Yes.
I love Cheverly. It's a beautiful little town, mixed race town, half black, half white. Well, it's more than half black now. It's shifting more and more black, but it's a good place to live and raise kids, okay? That was a sundown
Sundown
town
Town.
until 1968.
Wow.
That's when they broke the sundown laws in Maryland and said, okay, black families can move in. And Cheverly was one of the places that black families liked, that it was a good place to live. Okay. Trying to think, there's some town down near where they wanted to put in the day center, Lake Arbor.
Landover.
Yeah, but on the other side of the Beltway is Lake Arbor.
Mm.
Okay, you
Yes.
cross the Beltway from that, and you're in Lake Arbor. Well, I know somebody who moved into Lake Arbor, I think, in 1972, and he's unpacking the stuff in his new house, and he's moving he and his wife in, and the police show up and threatened to arrest him for being in somebody else's house, and he's claiming, "I bought this house." They made him prove legal documents that he had the right to be there because he was a black man in Lake Arbor. They were not friendly. Okay. So when you go back to the Lawrence Hogan senior days, and I heard like Hogan made a lot of inroads with the black community. His father was the county executive back when the Ku Klux Klan used to burn crosses. Folks, and I don't want to use any inappropriate language, but let's just say moving into a white neighborhood was considered uppity, and they might just come and burn a cross on your front lawn. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some
Yeah.
bad days back then. But at that point, the whole thing starts breaking. And when this thing starts changing, we go from the old money families that have been governing Maryland from the 60s, and then we move into the Mike Miller days and the
Mm.
Steny Hoyer days. And
Mm.
some people don't understand about Miller and Hoyer, and sometimes Mike more than Steny. Steny's a great guy, but I know not everybody loves him. But come on,
Not on the left here. Not on the left here. Nah.
hey, he opened the door. He and Mike opened the door for black families to move into Prince George's County. Okay. They did it. Okay. They opened the door so that black families could, families that moved up, got to DC, made a little money, want to buy a house, are thinking, we want some grass around it. We don't want to live in a row house. We don't want to, and the
Get out the
same things,
city. Yeah.
crime and, all the worries. And, I don't know if it was they were trying to get away from drug dealers or dance halls or bars or something, but, the idea that you could move out to Prince George's County for a better way of life. Mike and Steny made that possible. So, yeah, we can bash them from the right, from the left now, but keep in mind, until they came in, a black family had a hell of a time moving into Prince George's County. Okay.
I didn't know that about them. I know that I do know about some of the like the activists who push for the stopping of like redlining and things in these like sundown towns and stuff like that. Because you can even say in Charles County we had the similar problem of like sundown towns in how you had, I think it was the early 2000s when you saw a lot of black people moving in from DC and Prince George's down to Waldorf, and it made Waldorf the majority black city. And even now Waldorf's the kind of the reason why Charles County is now majority black and things like that. The one thing I am going to push back on is the reparations, to where the reparations commission is different than the normal studies that we've had for reparations, to say like, oh, well, what were the impacts? How were people affected by it? All that. I agree with you. If we're just studying how people were affected, I think that has been done. We don't need to do it again. From my understanding, the reparations bill was putting together a commission to develop what the actual policies would be if we had reparations. So they would basically essentially, the commission would be making a bill itself to say, hey, we need to divert money from this group to this group, from this institution here. We need to put money here, give this to this, blah, 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 blah. Housing credits, all that stuff. Whereas we haven't had that yet. We haven't had any commission in Maryland specifically figure out what reparations as a bill would look like. And I think that was something different. And I think that Wes Moore vetoing the bill, because he didn't have to veto it either. He could have just said, you know what, I'm going to just take my hands off of it. I'm not going to sign it. It'll go into a law because the majority of the legislature agrees with it. But he really made a stake. And I think that was, in my opinion, showing towards him wanting to be president or vice president, because he said he's not going to run for president, so maybe a vice president, and doesn't want to anger the majority white country, or even have something that people can like hold against him to say, oh no, he just supports black people. And I say have the Obama effect of like, I don't want to be a black elected official and look like I only support black I'm for everyone, even though I feel like reparations is not a, yes, it specifically helps black people, but it also helps everyone else because if everyone does well, everyone does well.
We're not even going to get into, we're going to have to save it for some other day. I don't want to talk about Obama because
Yeah, no.
I remember the first 6 years of the Obama 8 years. He was identical in policy to George Bush. So,
Yeah.
like, let's
Same.
not go down
Yep.
that road. He didn't
Yeah.
turn up the gas until the last 2 years he was in office because he was a lame duck then. And he could sign any executive order he wanted. But yeah,
That's a whole can of worms and a whole different road. Cause yeah, I have the same look. Me see, and that's the thing, Barry. We have very similar critiques of certain people. Like Obama, we probably have the exact same critique of him. Yeah. But even going into the Wes Moore slate, the first person who you cited in the article of Wes Moore kind of like targeting is Alethea McCaskill, but I definitely want to give you the floor first.
oh, this is a good person.
I think she is too.
I don't have anything against her.
Or can you say why did you list her first as like someone who Westmore could be targeting for the viewers who may not know who Alethea McCaskill is?
She is a loud woman. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You know, when voices are being heard, she's not shy about standing up and saying what she thinks. So she said she's indicated that she's willing to fight for the reparations study bill. And I don't think the governor wants to have a fight about the reparations study bill. I think he knows it's a loser issue. I think it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to get you a check in the mail anytime soon. I mean, if you think suddenly we're going to have a reparations study bill and then you're going to open it's going to be
No.
like, Publishers Clearinghouse, I got my check, like cut me a break. I mean, it's Wes instead turned around and he funneled $400 million into communities that were underserved to help out places where there were black families who were not getting a break. And instead of 2 more years of studying, he made a point to let's put money where it's going to serve the people, and that's his focus. I mean, I did my first campaign in 1970. That's
Really?
55 years ago,
For
and
who?
I probably sound like, I once told somebody I'm older than dirt. They said, "Oh, what did they have before dirt?" I said, "Rock."
Just rocks.
Just rocks, yeah. But seriously, I've been at this a long time, and it's the same stuff over and over and over again. And this endless cycle of study commissions is when you want to pass something, you pass something. When you want to do something, you do something. When you don't want to do it, but you don't want to say you're not doing anything, when you're an Anthony Muse sitting back, counting your money, cheating your churches, kissing up to Edward Burroughs, well, then you just say, oh, I want a study commission. Cut me a break. I mean, I don't think I'd see. And then people are out there going, look, he's against the Black Caucus. No, I'm not against the Black Caucus. I'm against another round of studies and commissions that aren't going to do anything.
Okay. So
I want some changes.
I'm gonna put the reparations bill to the side a little bit because it's gonna come up through the conversation about Alethea McCaskill though. So your thing is because she is unapologetically the sponsor on the House side of the bill, and because she is defending it and saying that we're going to fight for a veto, you're suggesting that she's going to be the target, or she's probably. And I agree with you too. She would be a target for Wes Moore slate because you want to get out the people who are going to criticize you, and especially if you're looking at a run for president in 2028, you don't want upon the next election the same people who were criticizing you also keeping their foot on your proverbial neck to say, hey, we're still going to talk about these problems and things like that. And I was kind of gonna do this towards the end, but let's kind of do it differently. So do you think that Wes Moore could potentially get rid of Alethea McCaskill because she is one of the newer elected delegates? She hasn't been there for like some people been there 20, 30 years. She comes out of Baltimore County. What do you think her chances are to defend herself or not go through targeting from him?
I like her. I think she's a good person, and I think she's done a good job. She was, I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, but wasn't she a union organizer or shop steward for the SEIU?
Wow, she might have been.
Yeah, and I ran a database team in the 2004 John Kerry race for president, and they gave me SEIU heroes. And I didn't know what an SEIU hero was. I wasn't even sure what SEIU was. But what they was I had a team of 8 database administrators working for me, and we were loading data on a daily basis for battles in all the battleground states. And we were using Palm Pilots. Remember, are you old enough to remember Palm
It's a
Pilots?
Palm Pilot.
It was like an early version of a smartphone.
Okay,
Okay.
no, no, no. I had
We're
a
talking 2004. This is like, I'm dating myself, but like, what it allowed was, um, we would take voting districts in the 13 battleground states.
Mhm.
We'd load the data, and then somebody like you or me would go on out door to door, and we'd get to 1608 Main Street, and we'd knock on the door, and we'd look at our Palm Pilot as we're walking up the walk, and it says, we had a lot of information. It'll be like 45-year-old woman has voted in 3 out of the last 4 elections, size 12 plus, dress size, smokes and drinks. And we'd have like mention this, 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 and this. Okay. You
You want
get
to
to
keep your
the,
cigarette tax low and you're drinking to a high.
we were doing things like tracking whether you smoke and drank and all these things. And like we were getting stuff. Do you realize when you have a Visa card and you sign all that stuff to get your debit card or Visa card and you agree to all these things? Do you know that they have the right to sell things like has bought adult novelties through the mail? Yes, no.
Really?
Has listened to adult pay-per-view in hotels when you're traveling. So your cousin comes in from out of town and you put him up in the hotel on your credit card and he listens and he watches a porno, and now it's
It's
Visa
you.
selling your information that says Carlos pays for pornography. Well, it's out
Wow.
there. This stuff is crazy, and they pick up smoking and drinking. Have you bought cigarettes? Well, when you go to the grocery store, they get a list of what you bought and how you paid for it. So you swipe your Visa debit card or your MasterCard or whatever, American Express, you pay for it, and you've got cigarettes and booze in there. They know it. And they know that how much you're drinking and smoking. And women, we didn't know their exact dress sizes. We would get like 0 through 3 and then 4 through 6 or something. We'd get like 3 size segments of women by dress sizes. And so like then we'd have to figure out, like some analyst somewhere would say, okay, size 3 and under women, don't smoke, don't drink, have pets. And you'd pitch them with one argument at the front door, and then her next door neighbor is a size 12, smokes and drinks and has 14 dogs or something. Well, you pitch her with a different argument. But so I'm sorry. I start telling these stories, and
No, you're good. No, you're
the
good. No,
point
you're good.
was we were getting help. We were working 90-hour plus weeks. I was working usually 90 to 96 hours a week. I would fall out of bed in Chevrolet, take the metro downtown. We was right by the White House. We'd load this data, and sometimes I'd be too tired, too focused, too busy to go downstairs and get a cup of coffee from Starbucks. So I'd take one of the SEIU here and get us coffee and give her money, and she'd go down and pick up the coffee. And their job was to keep us working. And I really appreciated those SEIU people, because I had a team that, like, if one of my people developing this data leaves for an hour, that may put us behind for the whole day. I mean, we were fighting hour by hour battleground states around the country. So, SEIU is a big deal. And Aletha McCaskill is a hero, and she's fought the fights, and she's good. Could we take her out? Well, in that district, I know that there's a fairly significant number of Muslim Americans.
Really? Oh wow,
Yes.
I didn't know that.
So we've got a mixture of black, Muslim, and white. I always get confused. I always forget what her district is. It's something in the low 40s.
It's 44B. So right in
44B.
Baltimore County. Here, I'll look up while you're talking. I'll look up. I can see
Yeah.
like what area.
You realize that an awful lot of people either ran for delegate or want to run for delegate, or look in the mirror and go, I'm so damn handsome. What did I make a great delegate? I'd be governor after a few terms,
Right.
There's always somebody who's willing to go after these races. What it comes down to is, can you get the support and can you get the money?
Mhm.
Wes is saying, I've got the money.
Just do your part and get the support.
Nobody better to get support from than the governor. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you go on the governor's slate, like right now, Anthony Muse, Danny Moore King went to. There was a rumor that one of the delegates in 26 was going to retire. And so Danny goes and tells Anthony that she wants to run for delegate. He says, no. I don't know what Danny said. She probably said, well, but I told my cousin, the governor, no,
Oh, they're related
no.
too. Okay, because I heard the Moore and the Moore.
Yeah, yeah, she is Danny, Dani. She's a sweetheart, very nice person. Okay. She goes to Anthony Muse, and Anthony is feeling cocky, like, I'm not giving her a delegate seat. And he wanted to give it to one of his buddies. And so he told her no. And then that sort of cracks this whole thing open. Now there's a guy down there who's, I don't know if he's filed yet, but he's running against Anthony Muse. So it's going to be like a little governor's slate, against Anthony and for Danny. And we'll see who else joins that slate. I mean, this stuff all comes down to is, can you get the money? And Wes Moore can get the money. I mean, if Wes runs out of money, he can call up Oprah and she can have a coffee klatch for him, and raise
Yeah,
another
she'll
20
bankroll.
million,
She'll bankroll the whole thing. She has money. She's not hurting.
And there's a lot of people. They go to these get-togethers up on Martha's Vineyard, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand, why do black people go to Martha's Vineyard when we've got Ocean City? Well, it's because they weren't welcome at Ocean City for a lot of years. Black families
Yeah.
were not welcome at the nicer hotels and nicer places to stay. And consequently, you've got someplace like Martha's Vineyard with one of the largest concentrations. August in Martha's Vineyard is one of the biggest concentrations of black wealth in the world. Okay. There aren't any kingdoms or countries in Africa where they put together that much black money in one place at one time as any Friday and Saturday night in Martha's Vineyard. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Okay. And Wes goes on up there and they look at him like he's royalty. And, there's always money available. He can raise money. Well, what would be a bad night for Wes on fundraising? Would be a godsend to somebody thinking about running, in District 26 or District 42B, or,
Even a percentage of the money he would raise in one day in Martha's Vineyard. If he said, here's 10% of it, that's a dream to someone.
Absolutely. Basically, if somebody says, okay, Carlos, I love you. We can put up the money for your campaign. We'll get you started. Here's this campaign professional, because Wes is getting people lined up for his presidential campaign. Well, he can put them down on your campaign while they're, they basically, anybody can become his farm team, and these are the people who, if he were to go for president, I'm not saying he will, but if he did, he'd have a trained farm team ready to move on up to the majors to take on, any number of different candidates. And we don't know who's going to be on top at that point. Gavin Newsom is hot right now. Gavin Newsom could be caught with a high school cheerleader next week and be out of the whole thing. I mean,
No, you're right.
You just never know.
It takes one scandal now and you're it takes one scandal, you're over, or one scandal far enough back and people forget about it. But no, you're right about Wes Moore too, because I think there will be a more targeting of Democratic legislators, is that going into the 2027 General Assembly session, he's going to want to lock down as many wins that he can say he has going into a presidential race or a vice presidential campaign, to say, look at what I do. I can do this on a national level. And if he still has these people like Alethea McCaskill, Anthony Muse, Cheryl Pastor, Veronica Turner coming out against him and not or working to not pass his legislation, I think that he can run up at that wall. But one thing I do want to say is, like, real quick, Alethea McCaskill, Delegate Alethea McCaskill, you are right. She was the vice president of SEIU Local 500. So she definitely has the union support, which will be interesting to see, the union support versus Wes Moore's support if he comes out against her, how that works. And then Anthony Muse has a challenger who's filed, Antonio Driver, as well. So it'd be interesting.
Antonio Driver is a first-class young man. I don't know how young he is. Everybody's
young to you.
Everybody's young to me. But I mean, here's a young, black, good-looking gay guy who is smart and has experience and wants to make a difference, and he'd be exciting. And Anthony's kind of yesterday's news. Anthony hasn't been exciting in years. Okay, back to Mike Miller a second, because here's something that people don't understand. Mike could raise money with Steny help. Okay, so they had all the money they needed. Mike controlled the senators. The senators control the delegates. The delegates control their local municipalities. Okay, So Mike could decide who was going to be county executive, who was going to get this job, who was going to get that job, who's going to move on up. And back in those days, if a black man wanted to run for office, they had a heck of a deal on this. If you wanted to run for office and you were black in Prince George's County, you had to go see Tommy Broadwater, former Senator Tommy Broadwater, until he went to federal prison. But when he got out, he was still in the middle of the whole deal. And he ran the Ebony Inn strip club, barbecue joint, rib house, just laundromat, grocery store. He owned all sorts of stuff up on Sheriff Road, up on the hill. And so you'd go see Tommy, and everybody, everybody had to go see Tommy. And if Tommy gave a good report, Mike would back you. So like people are like, Wayne Curry was the first black county executive, maybe in the state, but he definitely the first one in Prince George's County. He went to see Tommy Broadwater. He had a plate of ribs. They had a beer together. Tommy didn't drink, but he owned a bar, and got the report and went to Mike Miller, and Mike said, yeah, we'll go with him. And then Wayne becomes the first black county executive. See, people want to say Mike was racist because he used the N-word sometimes, or because he
I have people in my family who have protested outside of BK Miller's just because of the Miller family.
Well, yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
not saying they're saints.
No, yeah.
Mike used to wear cufflinks made out of a Confederate cavalry officer's uniform buttons. I mean, that was like,
yeah.
Here's a guy who could like pick the first black county executive in the state and use the N-word, insult Baltimore, and wear Confederate cavalry buttons as cufflinks. I mean, like
That's a mixed bag. That's a mixed bag of a legacy. That is definitely a mixed bag of legacy, but it also points towards, because I've even been shocked, to tell you the truth. I've volunteered. This is a bit of my own history that I hate. I volunteered once at a Steny Hoyer bull roast, and I saw there is an outpouring of older black people who love Steny Hoyer. It is just a love. Now, do they always know why they support him? Not really, because some of them I used to go to church with, and I asked them then, I was like, so what do you really like about Steny Hoyer? They're like, oh, I think he just does a good job. He's nice. Da, da, da. But I'm like, there is a support given their different histories and things like that. There's a group of black people who like Mike Miller. There's a group of black people who like Steny Hoyer.
You got to realize how much the world has changed. Okay. When I was a kid, there were very few jobs that were open to women. I just wrote a book about the 3 presidents killed in 1963 that I'm going to be publishing very soon. And in 1963, a woman could be a teacher, a nurse, a receptionist secretary. She could work in a factory. She couldn't be an engineer. At the phone company, she could be an operator. She couldn't be a lineman. She couldn't install lines, but she could answer your telephone. I mean, this was back in the days when there were not a lot of black people in most roles. There were neighborhoods that were strictly reserved. These were white neighborhoods. You don't live in there. And if you do live in there, your house will probably burn down. Well, you may say, well, why do these people like Mike Miller and Steny Hoyer? Because they opened up the neighborhoods to black folks. And I don't want to say they let them move in, but yeah, they let them move in. They changed society to where it was acceptable for a black man to move into Lake Arbor without getting the police up his tail about the whole thing. Okay. So you're looking at it from your eyes today, and you want to judge, these guys by your standards of modern day. I'm judging them by 40 years ago. Back when Mike was, state senator, and Steny was a younger congressman, they opened up Prince George's County for black families. When we say Prince George's County went from a majority white to a majority black from the 60s to the 70s into the 80s, they opened the door. Wow. They let it happen. And nobody ever gives them credit for that. So yeah, Mike used the N-word sometimes, but I'll bet you've got relatives or people show up at your party who might use that same word and not mean it any more terribly than he did. I don't
know about that part, but I do get what you're saying in the broader sense of it, because I didn't know about that history of Mike Miller and Steny Hoyer about being against. Yeah,
that's why I write about this stuff. Like, I realized that so much of this stuff. I was once talking about my mother and the women's movement, about entry to the job market. And this woman, very arrogant, we don't talk about entry to the job market. We talk about equal pay for equal work. And I said, well, I'm talking about 1953, and equal pay for equal work was not even on the table yet. You had to get the jobs before you could demand equal pay. My Aunt May led a strike at Bell Telephone back in the old days that ended up costing her a job, where she wanted men and women for Bell to have the same job opportunities and the same pay rates. Bell gave the operators a choice: come back to work or you're fired. Okay. That's the reality. Nobody wants to remember that getting women, the first woman lineman was a big deal. The first woman making equal pay for equal work. I'm not sure it's happened everywhere yet, but these these things are incremental change that we have to fight for. That's why you progressives frustrate the hell out of me.
So on that topic, I'll say this. I'll say that from my side, because I really don't even call myself a progressive now. I call myself more of a leftist just because the word progressive have been co-opted, where you got people like Amy Klobuchar who calls herself a progressive, which is weird. But is the fact that we get so caught up in incremental change. And I think that we lose the sight of we need to start having these like big change moments and fighting for a bigger purpose rather than fighting for, we'll take this little inch here, then this little inch here, then this little inch here. But those inches, I'll say back in the day, they used to be you can move 5 or 6 inches every few months to like a year. Now they make it so you may only get one good thing every 5 or 6 years. And I think that's why progressives and leftists seem more kind of like out loud now than they were back in the day. Cause you think back in like the FDR times, they had big fights, but they were able to get a lot of things. And I think ever since then, you haven't had or in the civil rights movement, you haven't had like a big, robust package of we're going to change society as a whole, as a culture, as a welfare state, as a social safety net, things like that. And also, I mean, also you have the inflection of like big money getting into politics, which has really ruined a lot of just social movements and progressivism as well.
Let me throw something at you because I think it's worth talking to your listeners. In the Democratic Party, about 70% of Democrats support transsexual rights. So trans rights are a big issue and they're popular and we win up until we hit the tipping point. The tipping point happens to be people born boys on the girls' team in high school. As soon as we get to the point of we go all through trans rights and everybody's with us. The majority of people in the United States support trans rights until we get to what they call boys on the girls team, high school. And suddenly our support for trans rights drops to 30%. Now, I get frustrated when people want to have the fight today and say, if you're not with us 100%, you're against the issue. You're homophobic. You're evil. You're the devil incarnate because you don't support, boys on the girls team. And yet, as soon as we do that, we lose races. And then yes, maybe we learned our lesson. We should have gone all the way, except now there's a Republican holding that seat. And that to me is a problem. And I tell you that because I happen to know the numbers. I've looked up the numbers. I've looked at the polling results. Okay. When, like had we gone for 2016, 17, 18, those years when we were fighting about Medicare for all, one of the problems with Medicare for all is when you say Medicare for all, people were like, oh, okay, well, if I don't want my Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'll just sign up for Medicare and I'll get it through Medicare for all. It's like, no, you can't sign up for Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's Medicare for all or nothing. And you're telling the union people who fought for their health care benefits, no, you're giving them up. Are you old enough to remember government cheese? All the stories about slicing the cheese with a razor so that
Yeah.
it would be thin enough to melt in a grilled
Melt.
cheese sandwich, like the crazy old stories
Yeah.
from the old days. But really, when you tell a union man that he's going to lose his Blue Cross Blue Shield
Hmm.
and get government health care,
Okay.
because when you say Medicare, that's what he
Government
hears,
healthcare.
government health care.
Yeah.
He's thinking, you're taking away all the cheese I like. You're taking away mozzarella and cheddar and, all
Oh, the
these
Gouda.
different Parmesan on my spaghetti and all these things. And you're going to give me a block of government cheese. It's like, no, it's part of the problem we run into is we get to the point where we go past what the public will want. Had we fought in 2016
Hmm.
um, for Medicare available to everyone should they
What
wish to
Medicare
sign up
for
for it.
those who want it?
Medicare for those who want it.
Gosh, very no. That was the problem. Is that they tried to break it up into different sectors. In the argument from the Bernie Sanders realm of politics, where I guess Medicare for all was birthed out of. One, I think it was a disservice to call it Medicare for all, because you have some people, even though Medicare is a highly loved program, I think there are issues with Medicare that it doesn't cover, like hearing, dental, and vision, that people needed to understand that when we're talking about Medicare for all, we talk about having a universal healthcare system. I think it should have been called universal healthcare. That would have been easier for people to swallow. But then I also look at it as going to unions and let them know, no, you're not going to have your Blue Cross, Blue Shield, your Aetna, or whatever. But all the money that you had to negotiate to take, okay, we're not going to have an increase in wages because we'll have this healthcare plan and all that. That frees you up to say all that money that was spent on healthcare, give that to your employee, or make the companies give that to the employees as extra pay, because now the companies don't have to give that money towards healthcare. It automatically comes out of taxes, and you can have a progressive taxation system to where you tax wealthier people more than you tax working class people to be able to help pay for it. But also, we have the money in this country. This country could have the best healthcare system out of any other country by having a universal single payer system. But we have so many lobbying from the insurance companies that they put in people's minds, oh, you're not going to get the healthcare plan that you like. And studies have shown most people don't even like, most people, hey, when they ask them, do you like your healthcare? They say yes, but they're not thinking about their healthcare. They're thinking more of like, I like my doctor, I like the hospital near me, I like this, I like that. They like the things that come from having health insurance, not the healthcare company itself. So I,
This may
I
be a
think I think
shock
we
to
could have.
you,
Go ahead.
Carlos. I'm going to tell you something that may shock you to your very core.
All
And
right, I'm
so
ready.
you may wake up at night screaming when thinking about what I tell you at this moment. But believe it or not, Bernie Sanders never called me to ask my advice on how to sell health care to the public.
No. What was he doing? He didn't have your direct nine. See,
He
that's the problem.
See, he was just shooting from the hip. We could have come
Yeah.
up with something that would sell to people, but
Right.
instead it's like we were trying to sell healthcare, mandatory government healthcare, whether you want it or not. When
I
people are
think
like,
that's
you're not
I
going to tell
think
me
that
what to do.
I think that is a very I think it's a societal issue, but when you poll people, they support universal healthcare. That is the majority. Even I think majority of Democrats, independents, and I think it's teetering on half support from Republicans. They're around 50% on it. I think that you have so much backing from the healthcare lobbyists and the healthcare, I want to say healthcare, the health insurance companies and lobbyists, that they are just pushing so much propaganda to people to be like, oh no, don't support, you don't want universal healthcare because you're going to lose out on your health insurance. Because honestly, too, it costs people less money to have a government run healthcare program because the health insurance companies are only allowed to be in operation because they deny people claims because that's the only way money comes into them. So I think it just needs to get, okay, I need to stop saying that too.
I truly hate healthcare companies.
Yeah, same.
3 of my babies died.
Well,
I
I'm
had
sorry.
3 daughters and they died before they were born. Every one of them I named Katie. And then every time I named a daughter Katie, she would die before she was born. And the last one, I'm going to say this without crying, forgive me, is a little tough on me. My wife was 7.5 months pregnant. And we had been warned by the doctor. I mean, this was like ultrasounds every 2 weeks. I mean, we had 3 successful boy births. We lost 3 girls. She lost the last baby at 3.5 months, 7.5 months. So, at 7.5 months, you've already felt the kid kick. I mean, it's a real person. Even though it's not born yet, it's a person. Okay. I rushed her to the hospital. We ended up with a police escort because I got pulled over at a high rate of speed on the way to the hospital, but the hell with them. She gets there, she loses the kid. It was devastating. It was as bad as anything we've ever gone through because that one was bloodier and messier than any of the others. And a few days later, she gets a letter from United Healthcare saying they were disallowing the claim because she did not pre-schedule and get the trip to the emergency room approved in advance.
What?
Yeah. Now, she calls me. She's crying. She's devastated. Some son of a bitch at the insurance company has told her that she didn't pre-schedule a miscarriage and took 2 weeks of fighting, and they paid it. You battle them hard enough, they always pay it, but they paid it. It was one of the most cruel and inhuman things I've ever seen. And then what's his name? Mario, not Nino, Mario Mangione from Baltimore
Yep.
County
Yep.
shoots the head of United Healthcare.
Luigi. Luigi
Luigi,
Mangione. Yep.
that's it. Luigi shoots the head of United Healthcare. And I'm thinking, my first thought was, yeah, just yeah. I get it. I completely get it. the other part of me, then I immediately recoil and said, "Oh no, shooting people is bad. We should never do bad things." And I'm thinking those sons of bitches with what they've done to everybody besides my wife and my family and the pain they put us through. And then I said, "But nobody should ever shoot anyone." I have mixed feelings on healthcare. It's just I'm looking at this and I'm thinking what will sell to the American people, okay? You want to sell trans rights? Don't fight the battle of high school sports teams. You want to sell Medicare for all? Well, then ease it in. To my mind, some of these fights that we're going to lose, we don't have to lose. And I'd rather get half. I'd rather go a step than get pushed back two and end up with a Republican in office. We ended up with Donald Trump in office, and probably you should take your healthcare ideas, write it up, send it to him. He'll be so surprised to get it from you that maybe he'll read it. And they're actually talking about Trump care to replace Obamacare because they don't want that
Hey,
Democratic healthcare. They want good
right.
Republican healthcare. It's like, hey, maybe they'd buy your ideas. He's looking for a win. He doesn't really care what the win is. He's not ideological at all. He wants a win. So if somebody were to suggest your healthcare plan instead of my healthcare plan, he,
He may do it.
it's possible he could flip because he has no ideological basis. He's not a conservative.
No,
There is
far
nothing
from it.
conservative about three wives, about a tax and spend thing where we're loading up debt onto future generations. I mean, Republicans used to cry about tax and spend Democrats. Well, tax and spend Democrats are a lot better than borrow and spend Republicans.
Right.
But we're going down a long road on this.
No, no, you're good. No, you're good. Because I actually like how this is like kind of shifted into different topics too, because you're right. I think it is about how you sell a program and how people think about it. And I think it's also about having those like real world stories that people talk about the horrors of like private health insurance, things like that, where the profit is and things like that as well. And I think even to your point on the trans thing is that, and this is one reason why the left has a criticism of the, I call it the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, is because the corporate wing, remember in 2016 when it was Bernie versus Hillary Clinton, Bernie was getting trashed because they said he's not your like quote unquote what you would call now progressive. He wasn't the trans right issue candidate. He didn't have the black agenda and stuff like that, and had all the like the woke stuff. Hillary Clinton's main case against him was, oh, he's too woke. Or no, he's not woke enough, and all those like economic leftist priorities aren't going to work. And I remember one quote that she had was, what was it? She said that breaking up the banks isn't going to like end or isn't going to fix racism and things like that. So where the left, we really blame the corporate wing of the Democratic Party for making all of these quote unquote woke politics or identity politics the main thing. We were fighting mostly for economic stuff, the higher taxes on rich, universal health care, having a more robust social safety net, things like that, housing for all, jobs for all, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was just the mix of where
I
of how
was
the
never going
parties
to
had that
support
shift.
Bernie. There was no way in hell that I was ever going to support Bernie because back in the 80s, I
Mhm.
was a volunteer helping our brave freedom fighters in Nicaragua fight the evils of communism. Now, keep in mind that consisted mostly of cocktail parties and press conferences. It was not like I was in the
Good
jungle
job, Bear.
with a rifle. So, I mean, I actually authored the plan to destabilize the Nicaraguan government and call for free and fair elections. Years back, I was on a press conference tour with the head of the Import Export Association of Guatemala. Okay. And we're going around talking about the dangers of communism and how communism could possibly spread into other places. You know, we were talking about there's a group of people that are they don't know how to identify them. They call them mosquito people. Okay, not mosquito like the bug that bites you. Okay, mosquito people were primarily Native American and African and a mixture of shipwrecked Spanish sailors. So we have this like weird mix of like black, Indian, and white people called the mosquito people. And the communists just hated them. I don't know why they hated them so bad, but they persecuted them and they persecuted the Jews in Nicaragua. Bernie Sanders supported the government in Nicaragua. Stuart Pittman, current chairman of the Democratic Party, supported the communists in Nicaragua. and I supported the
Wow.
freedom fighters. But I've forgiven Stewart because a friend of mine close to the governor has asked me just to not make a big deal out of it. So I'm
Wait,
not going to
wait,
make a big deal.
wait, hold up. Hold up. You can't say that and just run it through, Barry. Hold up now. Wait, so somebody from the governor's office has asked you not to criticize Stuart Pittman?
Let's just say I've got a friend who's in the cabinet, and we exchange. I tell that person what I think the governor needs to hear. They tell me what they think I should do. We have a good balanced relationship. I don't get orders from the governor's office. On the other hand, when I talked to her about, wouldn't it be great if the governor supported Antonio Driver? And she said, well, this was when Antonio wanted to run for delegate. I said, well, and she said, well, the governor's cousin, Danny, is a really nice person. And it's like, okay. So
Say, let
then,
me go ahead and nudge you over here. Well, wait
you
for this
know,
person.
it's like she doesn't say, Barry, you should back Danny. On the other hand, she did tell me what a nice person Danny was. So, I pay attention to what they say. And, like it's been suggested to me that I be more forgiving. We
Why
are
is that?
talking about 40 years ago.
Yeah, long time
Should
ago.
Stuart Pittman be forgiven for innocent mistakes 40 years ago? Yeah. Yeah. So, like, when he sits back in the house, the mansion that he lives in on the 650-acre horse farm that was formerly tilled by slaves and was built by slave labor, and talks about forgiving, it's time to forgive slavery. I'm not going to be the person who stands up and says, well, then, okay, why don't you track down some of the people who are descended from the slaves on your farm and tell them they can stay in the house too?
You won't say it, but I'll say it.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to go public with that because I'm trying to be
Yeah,
nice to Stewart.
of
I shouldn't
course.
pick on Stewart.
No. Um, okay, so closing the loop to the slate, definitely I want to ask, so or I guess to kind of bring up the question now of, have you heard anything about specific people who may be targeted for the slate?
I have heard names that top two on the list are Anthony Muse and Aletha McCaskill because they're the sponsors of the reparation bill, and they are the ones who have been most loudly vocal threatening the governor.
Okay.
You got to understand, they may be speaking out on something they feel is important. The governor and his staff is hearing it as threats.
Yeah.
So that, but I'm also hearing, and like I have friends of mine who see things in a black white dichotomy. It's black or it's white, or, that's always the black white thing going on all the time. It's like the governor's looking at, I've heard possibly that he'll take on that Cheryl Kagan
Really?
from Montgomery County, that she'll
Really?
take on
Why?
Ben Kramer. So now is, like these are not and Bill Ferguson.
Mm.
Okay. Um, did your electric bills or your heating bills or your gas bills go up lately?
Mm-hmm.
They went up because of SB 1 2023. Now, SB 1 means Senate Bill 1, which is a customary thing done in the Maryland General Assembly, where the Senate president picks the most important bill. It gets called SB 1, Senate Bill 1. And that announces to everybody in the Senate and the House and the state that this is the most important bill for the session. And this was to protect consumers from people who might try and sneak in and sell them cheaper electricity. Well, they made it sound really good. They made it sound like a great idea. And everybody backed it. SB 1 was put together by Bill Ferguson. Bill Ferguson put together the energy deal. Now, he just happens to work for a company in the energy business. Okay.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Bill is what, chief corporate counsel or something for like somebody involved in solar heating. He's got massive conflicts of interest, and nobody says anything because he's Senate president. So this all happened afterwards, and nobody wants to challenge him. So Bill's got massive problems if anybody wants to peel back his conflicts of interest. He put in SB 1. He raised your electric rates. He raised your gas rates. He allowed PG&E and all these companies. He gave them the right to slide through, and it was kind of this ridiculous thing where they could say, we'll allow the power companies to put through rate increases based on future costs. So we're going to build a new power plant. Let's start
Mm-hmm.
raising rates for it now. Okay. And
What?
so they raised the rates based on future usage, and they hurt families. And there are people who this winter, there is somebody listening to this right now whose grandmother is going to be pulling on extra blankets and shivering this year. There's going to be a mother who's going to have to decide between buying the cheapest food she could get and serve the kids spaghetti the next 5 out of 7 nights because she got to choose between the electric bill for the heat or feeding the kids. There's people who are going to be looking at, do they really need that medicine? There are people who are going to suffer this winter because that son of a bitch raised their electric and gas bills because he could. Nobody's calling him on that. Now he's going to say, no, we don't want redistricting. If I were Governor Wes Moore, and Governor Wes Moore never asks my opinion on these things, but if I were Governor Wes Moore, I'd hang that son of a bitch out. I'm sorry, I don't want to say bad
No,
words
you're good. Go ahead. Go
on
ahead.
your program, but I would not, I would hang him out to dry. I would back a candidate. I'd put the Leave No One Behind slate in power in his district and take him out at the voting place because he's corrupt. He's dishonest, he's corrupt, and I think it's time to shut him down. And we have a way of, as long as he runs the Senate, and it's the top down thing that Mike Miller did back in the old days. The Senate president controls the Senate. The senators control their delegations. Their delegations can have a lot of impact on their counties. So everybody's got to stay in line because they don't want to get in trouble with the Senate president. Well, the Senate president raised your grandmother or my grandmother, or well, my grandmothers are all dead, but somebody's grandmother's electric bill. Somebody's going to be shivering this year. Somebody's going to be hurting this year. Somebody's going to be feeding their kids less and less nutritious food because they're trying to stretch their dollars out because Bill Ferguson did something dirty to them. I'm sorry if I get angry sometimes, but
No, no,
this
you're
is
good.
why I go on year after year writing about this stuff, trying to tell enough of the truth to get out to the people because God is outrageously good to me. God is so much better to me than I could possibly deserve. Everything I want, everything I need, God takes care of. Of course, I don't want much and I don't need much, but He takes care of it.
That's a blessing.
And
That's good.
I try and give back to the people by shining light under rocks that don't get a lot of light otherwise. And, I had something exciting happen a week ago Saturday. We had
What
our
happened?
all-time highest readership amount on everybody's Maryland politics. We got 59,000 people, over 59,000 people in one day. It is way, way up. It used to be 60,000 people was a big month, huge month. And now we're at like 212,000 people for the month based on the last
Amazing.
28 days.
Congratulations.
Well, here's the difference. I'm I'm writing Maryland Wire on Substack, and people used to say, "Well, how does Barry know this? Where does he know this?" I don't trust his figures. I mean, he says a lot of stuff. He writes all the time, but where's the facts and figures? Can he prove it? Facebook will not allow you to use footnotes effectively. As soon as you put in a footnote, then they decide whether or not you use it properly and they penalize you. And I actually got suspended for like 3 days for using footnotes, which they said I didn't use properly, and I used them exactly right. So now I've got an article that I did today on David Trone. I think it's got 8 footnotes and 14 citations. So if they want to say Barry doesn't have the facts and figures, they're crazy because I got more facts and figures than anybody. I mean, not every article has got that many, but I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
You
footnoting
do
the
your
heck out of this
research.
stuff. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm documenting it. And suddenly I found that since I put up a Substack site, people take it seriously now. People who never read me before, people who never listened to me before, people who avoided me before are now reading me all the time. And I know because they send me little notes saying, I like your article, or that's great, or good job. I mean, when you get former state chairman of the Democratic Party giving you notes saying they agree with your article, you're making a difference. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'm not being nice to everybody. I'm pretty much always nice to the governor out of respect. I mean, he's our first black governor. We need him to be a success. I want him to be a success. To me, the opportunity that we may see Wes Moore as president or vice president is okay. You're going to accuse me. It's an incremental step in the process, but it's a big step.
It
Wes Moore
it's
as
it's
president or vice president would be.
it would be historic for representation. And I think that I am more so on the edges of supporting representation if it's not backed up by policy. And I think that's the part of the left is more of like Sure, give us the representation, the person that we never had before, blah 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 blah. But give me at least some policies that I can look at and be like, oh, I'm glad that I know you in there. You're gonna put in X, Y, and Z. And for all the great things that Westmore has done as far as who he is, his life background, and all that, I think he also just comes with a sense of moderatism to him that kind of like waters it all down for me personally. But I do get where you're coming from with it.
Let me say something just for the record, now to respectfully throw out some comments
Yeah, please.
in disagreement with what you have to say. He's a moderate and he never does anything. He put $400 million into depressed and deprived communities of color in the state of Maryland. He reached out and he put money where it counts. He put money where it's going to help black families. He helped in a way that a study commission would not. He could have done a study commission to study for the next several years on whether to give $400 million. He gave $400 million to where it was needed. And then Bernie Sanders, you guys love Bernie. I gotta tell you, at one point I looked up and like I'm always doing research. I'm on the
Hmm.
research all the time. So like my big question is, what bills did Bernie Sanders pass?
Gosh.
And in one year, the only bill that he was a primary sponsor of that passed was a bill to name post office after a former Republican presidential candidate. Bill Dole, whatever Dole's name was.
Bob Dole.
Bob Dole. He named a post office after Bob Dole. That was his one bill for the year. So yeah, he's Mr. Leftist.
But I
He's a
will say, but
leftist who does nothing.
we will say this, that Bernie Sanders also has the title of Amendment King just because he gets so many amendments into other people's bills as well. So he does has his positive. And I'll say this, as someone who's not really a Bernie Sanders fan as I used to be, I think he is more, and this is a whole different topic, but when it comes to the Israel Palestine, he's not on the right side of the genocide there, but also when it comes to challenging the Democratic establishment, I feel like he misses the mark a lot with challenging the establishment. That's where I give credit to Republicans a little bit because I believe Republicans, to a sense, will challenge their own establishment more than Democrats will challenge their establishment. More so nationally than locally.
I went to Iran one time and sat down and had dinner with Hassan Rouhani, who ended up as president of Iran. And over dinner, we mapped out a peace plan. And basically, you asked me a question, I'm going to give you the answer. So Rouhani wants to know, what would we have to do to have peace and free trade with the United States? And I said, well, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is Israel. And then I had to spend 10 minutes explaining what an 800-pound gorilla in the room was, because that did not translate at
He's like,
all.
what are you talking about?
And I came back with a peace plan. And basically,
Mhm.
what it said was put the kibosh on Hamas and Hezbollah, pull back armed soldiers from the Israeli border to give Israel a longer time to ramp up in case of invasion, open the oil pipeline through Jordan from Iraq, and allow Israel to buy all the oil it wanted at market rates. And the big problem for Israel, bigger than oil, is water. And there's a plan that's been on the table for years to pipe a freshwater river that dumps into the Mediterranean, put it into 24-foot conduits, two of them, run them down through Syria, Lebanon, and into Israel, allowing Israel to have all the water it wanted at very reasonable rates. This would not be a big thing. That water dumps every day into the Mediterranean, turns salty. They could have just taken the water out of the river at that point and diverted it to Israel through 24-foot conduits, and it would have given Israel an increase in defense, oil, water, more peace and security. All Iran wanted in return was this okay, two things. Free trade with the United States. They wanted our help redeveloping the Khuzestan oil fields, which were destroyed in the Iran-Iraq war and have been sitting basically idle for all these years. They want to rebuild their infrastructure that got destroyed and it was never rebuilt after the war. And they wanted equal rights for all Christians, Muslims, and Jews in Israel, or as they called it, Palestine. So right now, if a person is arrested in Israel, how they will be treated and how they will be judged before the law will depend on whether they're Christian, Muslim, or Jew. Okay. There was a case a number of years ago, but I stopped paying any attention to Israel. It's just a quagmire that is never going to get better. until maybe the next coming of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But outside of that, I'm not sure what else is
Okay.
going to fix it. But a girl was accused of throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers. They surround her house at night. They kick down the door. They drag the girl out of her bed. She's like 14 years old. They put her in confinement and they kept her for months and months and months. No trial, no judgment, no verdict, no rights. I mean, picture if you had a sister or a daughter or a cousin, 14-year-old girl who might have or might not have been involved in throwing rocks at the Israeli soldiers, dragged out of the house. They were legally citizens in Israel, and they did not have the same rights available to any Jewish girl of the same age. That's the problem I have with Israel. I support the right of Israel to exist, but they'd be a lot smarter if they made it the best place on earth for Christians, Muslims, and Jews to live in the Middle East. It's not.
No,
I mean,
no.
we saw
It's
the
a
same thing.
theocracy.
We saw the same thing in Africa. France cries that it lost Algeria and its colonies in Western Africa because a black man in Algeria or Togo or any of these other countries that they ruled did not have the same rights, even though they were a French citizen by French law. They couldn't go to France anytime they wanted, and they couldn't like say, "Hey, I'm going to move to Marseille and get a job in Marseille." They couldn't do it. They never made. See, that's the thing. We should be making all of this equal. Okay. So,
But I think that's the main problem where Israel doesn't want an equal society. They want a theocracy society of where Jewish people are above Christian, Muslims, and other Arab people as well. And I look at it from a sense of it's how Israel was founded. It was founded as a settler colony in Palestine, and slowly but surely has moved people out. Even when you look at the settlements in West Bank or the genocide going on in Gaza. Yeah, to me, the first thing that needs to be done is the U.S. just stop with the weapons. Just say we're just done. You all are going to have to just learn to get along with your neighbors. We're done financing your defense or your offense as well. Because to me, and it's been some people who say, okay, well, why don't we just stop the offense but keep the defense? Their defensiveness also protects them and allows them to do as bad as they do because they do not fear retaliation really either.
there's a rock that causes all the problems. This whole thing is over a rock. And
I don't know if I would fully say that. I would also say
no, I
the
mean a great big chunk of stone. I
oh,
mean,
oh you
this
mean
whole
oh you
thing,
mean like
I mean,
not a
a
rock as a
rock,
place. You
a
mean a rock? Yeah,
great
you're
big,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
you're right.
there is a great big rock. Okay. And this used to terrify me when I used to worry about Israel. This is one of the reasons why I no longer focus at all. I avoid the Middle East as much as I can. But on the Temple Mound is basically they put walls up and leveled off the same hill that Abraham took Isaac up and was going to sacrifice him because the angel told him to. And then the Lord came down and stayed his hand. For any of your Christian folks, they know the story of Abraham. And, instead of killing his son as a sacrifice, they sacrificed a ram that was caught in a thicket. That rock is still there. You're thinking, well, what does that rock have to do with anything? They built the temple on top of it. When you hear the Temple Mount, that's on top of the rock, but it doesn't stop there. Okay. So it's a key place because of Abraham and the Abraham covenant. And then Jesus shows up and he's up at the temple on top of the rock. Okay, so now we've got Abraham for the Jews and Jesus for the Christians at the rock. And then Muhammad had his midnight ride and he rode, it wasn't a mule. Some people it was actually a type of wild ass, but it's impolite to refer to it as a wild ass. So because nobody would ever want to say that he had a wild ass. So instead, I believe the term is onafer, which is a type of mule that cannot be tamed. It could never be tamed, but he tamed it. He tamed one, and he rode that from, guess where he rode it from?
Where
The
back
rock. So now we've got all three religions at the same point, and then because the Jews were troublesome people who got kicked out by the Romans, they dispersed through through the diaspora. The Muslims take Jerusalem. They build the Al Aqsa Mosque on. Guess where they built the Al Aqsa Mosque?
on the rock.
On the rock.
On the
So
rock.
now we've got
Everything's on the rock.
Abraham and Jesus and Muhammad and the Al Aqsa Mosque. And if you ever look at a picture of Israel, of Jerusalem, Look for the gold dome that you can't miss. In all the pictures, there's a gold dome. So the next time you look at a picture of Jerusalem, look at the gold dome.
Mhm.
Guess where that gold dome is?
Barry, if you tell me The Rock again,
It's on the rock.
everything's on The
It's
Rock.
the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the rock. Now, Christians in the United States are waiting for
The Rapture,
the rapture, the end times, Jesus coming back. And guess where Jesus is going to come to?
The Rock.
The Rock. So now
Oh.
there are people out there who, and this used to scare the heck out of me when I used to look at terrorist stuff. I was just a home hobbyist. I was not involved in any of this stuff officially. I just happened to be a home
Officially.
hobbyist interested in this. But I was always worried that some American wanting to bring home the rapture and start the end times and get Jesus to come back and rule earth and all the end times prophecies to go would fly a jet into that rock, hit the Al Aqsa Mosque, blow the whole thing up. And at that point, all hell breaks loose because the Arabs would see it as provocation. Christians would see it as provocation. Jews would see it as provocation, and World War III would start, all because of a rock. Now, the best thing we could do would be to sneak in there without telling them, cut the rock off the hill, move it to New York, and then we're all safe. But I don't think we could pull that off.
I don't think so either, Barry. I think that'll be a bigger problem than it all. I think. But making this full circle as we come up closing here, I do want to get your thoughts. Or you kind of said your thoughts on the redistricting thing. I'll say this: I said it before in a podcast I was doing today on Halitics, where I'm not 100% sold on should we do redistricting, shouldn't we do it, just because I look at it as it's one seat with Andy Harris's seat. I think also you have the Bill Ferguson argument of the Maryland courts, who majority of the court who will be overseeing this is the Larry Hogan appointed court judges. So you could have it where they look at the map, say it's heavily gerrymandered, and then turn around to make a 5-3 map or a 6-2 map in favor of
You missed
Democrats
the
over
Barry
Republicans.
O'Connell plan.
I
I
must
covered
have.
that. Okay.
Okay, very. You
The
know what?
Senate has the right to
Okay, go
dissolve
ahead.
the Supreme Court, kick off the Larry Hogan judges, and appoint
Wait,
5 new
really?
judges.
Why is this not talked about? Okay, Barry. So look, we're gonna save this because I'm gonna have you on a separate time, and we're
I
just gonna
talk
talk
too
about
much.
the
I get
redistrict. No,
I
no,
get
you're good.
rambling. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, you're good. No, you're good. Because I like that we covered a whole bunch of different stuff. So I guess wrapping up, two questions I have left for you is one, overall, tell people, what do you think about the Wes Moore slate? Do you think it's going to be successful? Do you think if there's going to run into problems? What's the Barry O'Connell forecast?
I'm hoping because Governor Wes Moore is basically holding a gun to their heads, and I don't think Anthony Muse. Well, I think Anthony Muse is done. I think he's going to lose that seat just because he's bankrupted churches. He's got children with women besides his wife. I mean, he's a general character. I mean, he's been carrying on. He's the worst of the old corrupt Prince George's County. So I'm hoping Anthony Muse is gone and Ed Burrows. Probably when Ed goes to prison, Anthony will just disappear and never be seen again, unless he gets a cell with with Edward. Um, Aletha, I suspect that she may work out a deal with the governor. I don't want to see her lose her seat. Okay, if she goes head to head with Governor Moore, she loses,
Really?
and we lose, and the black people
Yeah.
of Maryland lose, and the black people of the United States lose the chance for one of the greatest leaders. One of the
Gosh.
single greatest leaders in the history of the United States might never be governor if she goes head to head with a governor. So we need him as president or vice president, and we need him at least getting a cabinet spot, and influencing policy on a national level. I don't want to see that thrown away. We can talk about, I like him because he's moderate. You probably like him because he's leftist. I'm not quite sure
He's
how we
not.
describe the governor, but
No, yeah.
the governor is the governor, and I think we'd be better off if they make a deal.
Okay.
If they decide to run somebody against Bill Ferguson, I will be doing the happy dance because he is a bad man doing bad things to the innocent people. And you know something? When somebody asks you, what did Barry say about Bill Ferguson? You just tell them Barry said that grandmothers and babies and children and mothers are going to suffer this winter because of what Bill did. You can take that to the bank.
Okay. Wow. Strong words. Strong words, Barry. Strong words.
You
I'll
didn't
say
bring me on
in
here to be nice.
No, I didn't. I didn't, and I brought you on knowing that you're not going to be nice, so you're not going to hold it back. So I'm glad you did that. Thank you. And my last thing, question for you is, please tell people where they can find you, where they can read your Substack, join your Facebook group, and also any last words you have for the audience here.
Yeah, I'll make it real simple. Most people know me through Facebook. That's where we get the biggest audience. And the group is Everybody's Maryland Politics. Okay. And it's pretty easy to find. If you look for the Substack, it's the Maryland Wire on Substack. We're getting a lot more readers. In fact, I mean, if you look up Jack Johnson, Aisha Brave Boy,
Brave boy.
and Edward Burrows, crooked and going to prison, you'll probably come right to my Substack. We've got that locked down. That's one of our key search terms. I'm not that tough to find, and I'm available. You know, a lot of people listen. One of the reasons why I have the stories and the insight that I do is because there are so many people across the state of Maryland who, if they said what I said, they'd lose their jobs. So I get messages, I get text messages, I get phone calls, I get people call me up on Messenger all the time and say, if I tell you something, will you never tell anybody I told you? And it's like, yeah, but I got to find validation. I mean, somebody told me today that somebody is a whoring, hell raising, drinking son of a bitch who's rude to women. I said, you know, I'm not going to use that until I can find someone else who will assure me that's true. And he goes, what if I got one of the women to talk to you? It's like, all right, we're in business then, you know, feel free.
And then when you talk to them and verify it all, I'll bring you right back on the podcast, and then we can talk about it.
Hey, you know something? These guys, years ago, somebody asked Vice President John Nance Gardner what he thought of being vice president. And he was FDR's first vice president. And his great quote was, it's not worth a bucket of warm piss. He actually said that to the press, which they changed it to warm spit because nobody could put piss in the newspaper. But at that point, he could say anything he wanted because the Democrats in 1932 and 34 were not going to lose. The Republicans had caused the Depression. Well, right now, the Democrats in Maryland could do anything they want. They could be rude to the governor. They can treat him with disrespect like they have been because they'll override his veto. Well, what he's saying is go ahead, override my veto, and it will cost you your career. I'll put somebody up against you. You know, I mean, there's no give and take. See, they ran roughshod over Larry Hogan for 8 years.
Yeah, it was easy.
Wes Moore
He's
is not
Republican,
Larry Hogan.
they're Democrats. Yeah, he's Republican, they're Democrats. They can do. And I will say one thing, because we do got to close. But actually, I'll say my thing and let you finish.
Hey, I just want to say it's been a pleasure. I talk too much. I'm probably going to irritate some people. And anybody who disagrees with anything I have to say, you're welcome to write and tell me about it. And I may even care.
Just maybe.
Just maybe.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And I'll see you next time, next Wednesday on the Left Handed Leftist podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care now.